Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
G'day, Nils Vesk from Innovate or Die. Welcome to this series where we're going to be looking at ways that you can bring commercial innovation to your organisation and your business for great commercial gain. So you might be thinking, innovate or die, what a serious topic. Well, the reality is, unless we're innovating, we're either competing on price or we're playing catch up, trying to chase our competitors as they go out and capture the market. And innovation is such a crucial key element that we all need in our businesses today. And when I've worked with organisations around the world, there's one common problem that I find, and that is that there are too few innovations and they're just too far apart. And the number one cause behind all of this is our biased perception. The bottom line is the way that we've been taught to think about innovation has skewed the way that we think about innovating and the ways that we can come up with new ideas. And that can either be a good thing or a bad thing. And in each one of our episodes, we're going to be unpacking a model called innovation archetypes. Because if we can understand the biases of the most amazing professional innovators and use their best principles, then we can use that to create great commercial gain in our own organizations. So let's quickly unpack each one of these archetypes and phases so you've got an idea of what we're going to be doing in each episode. And so we have universally 4 phases of innovation when it comes to it. We've got the investigation phase, ideation, iteration, and commercialization. The investigation phase is all about looking for insights as to where we should be applying our thinking to generate brilliant ideas. The ideation phase is all about coming up with lots and lots of great ideas. And then this iteration phase is all about testing, piloting and prototyping our ideas so we can minimize the risk while increasing our certainty. And finally, we've got the commercialization phase. This is all about taking our idea, building it, and then selling it to the masses so we can get a good commercial return. And each one of our episodes, we're going to unpack one of these expert archetypes so we can borrow and model them to get some great commercial results. So let's get ready to rock, innovate or die. G'day, welcome to Innovate or Die. Our episode today is going to be working around our stomach. We're not going to put on weight, but we're going to learn from the masters of culinary experience. This episode is how to innovate like a chef for rapid business stimulation. And I'm kind of excited about this for a number of different reasons. Mostly because I think chefs are amazing at demonstrating restraint, knowing how to stimulate the senses and also how they test and taste. If you really think about it, what chefs do amazingly well also is that they're amazing at making things happen very, very quickly. At the end of the day, if they can't cook a recipe in a certain amount of time, then people are going to go hungry and people are going to walk out the door. So what are 3 commercial reasons why we want to innovate like a chef? Well, the first one is that chefs live and die by innovation. If you think about it, whether you're a 2 or a 3-star Michelin hat chef, if you're not creating the world-breaking and absolutely amazing dish, then people aren't going to come to your restaurant. Each day they have to be able to look at ways that they can come up with a new dish that's going to captivate and really, interrupt the usual thinking that's going on for a diner so that they come back and tell everyone else about it. The second commercial reason why we'd love to learn to innovate like a chef comes down to the fact that chefs just aren't about creating a great meal. They're about creating an experience. And they understand that the experience is almost as important as the dish itself. So how do we stimulate the senses beyond just having a dish with certain spices and certain flavors in there? The third commercial reason why we can learn from innovating like a chef is that at the end of the day, if you really think about it, a commercial kitchen is a commercial laboratory. It's the opportunity where they can actually test out their ideas to come up with new recipes day in, day out. And to give you a commercial example of that, you might think of in Australia, we have a very well-known chef by the name of George Columbaris, who's a host on a very famous TV show called MasterChef. And what George has at one of his restaurants, he actually has his own little separate kitchen just around the other side of the building from the main commercial kitchen, and that is his invention lab. So this is one of the reasons why we can really learn to think and innovate like a chef, because really, if we think about it, innovation is experimentation, and having a lab can make it happen. So who are some poster childs that we might want to think of when it comes to this master chef innovator? I think you can't go past one guy by the name of Heston Blumenthal. And Heston Blumenthal, if you haven't heard of him, you must be living under a rock of some sort, because Heston Blumenthal is famous on television for his TV shows and also infamous for some of his restaurants around the world. His probably most famous restaurant is called The Fat Duck, and it's booked out well over 18 months in advance. It's got a number of hats for its amazing excellence. But what Heston Blumenthal does so well is that he experiments, so much so that he actually earned an honorary degree from, I think it was a university or the Chemists Society of England, just for his absolute passion for experimenting and testing things. And we'll talk a little bit more about Heston Blumenthal as we go through this experience. So let's find out what some of these principles are that innovative chefs are using, and see how we can find what they are and then adopt them and adapt them for our businesses and our organizations to get some better commercial return. So the first thing that I think that chefs really understand is that they need to test their food and taste it continually. And you'll find that even when they're at the building blocks of a dish, they are tasting and they're testing their food. They're not waiting until they get to the end result and they're just about to put the meal on the table. They're tasting and testing continually through. And the reason why chefs know this is that it's really almost impossible to resurrect a dish that's gone too far down the end. It's much easier to correct mistakes at the start than it is to do it at the end. And if we were to look at this graph over here, you can see in terms of innovation, whether you're making a dish or not, the cost of implementing or the cost of fixing things up at the early stage of a dish is pretty minimal. Oh, you can just add a little bit of this, add a little bit of that. But at the end of a meal, at the end of an innovation, the cost and the implications of trying to fix it and modify it are really high and really complex. So whether you're making a dish or whether you're actually creating an innovation, innovate like a chef. And by that, what I mean is test it and taste it, continually go through the stages, just checking the progress, seeing that things work, rather than waiting for the end and going, oh my God, we're going to have to do some major reinvention for this product. So testing and tasting is one of those things that the chefs do amazingly well. So what is it the chefs do really, really well? Well, they understand the concept of flavour. It makes sense that they're chefs. Now, the interesting thing is when it comes to finding the flavours, there are 5 universal flavours out there around the world. And if we know what those flavours are, and this is what chefs do amazingly well, is they know how to balance the flavours to create an experience that makes us go, wow, that dish was divine. And there are 5 universal flavours out there. We've got salty, which is quite obvious. It's about saltiness in the food. There's the bitter taste. There's the sweetness. There's the sour. And there's a taste that's called umami, which is Japanese, basically translates to, I guess you'd say it's savoury or brothy in certain ways. So they're the sort of key 5 tastes that we have out there. And you'll often hear about food critics and I guess people that really know the culinary delight, or even chefs, when they talk about food, it's no point having a dish that's sweet, too sweet on its own. They balance it off either by having a little bit of sourness or a little bit of bitter, or maybe a little bit of saltiness. And so this whole importance of understanding these flavours for a chef is knowing, let's not just do one thing, but actually balance them. So what's the point, you might be thinking? I'm not creating a dish in my business or in our organisation. So what this, I guess, lends us to is to think about, if we're applying this to our business or our organisation, what are the 5 universal flavours that we work with? And here's some examples I think that can work. So I think in our business, we strive to do a lot of these different things. We think that it's really important that we're always timely. It's on time, it's quick to respond, it's quick to deliver things as well. It's about simplicity. When we're talking about innovation, we need to make it simple so people can understand. It's about looking at things that are remarkable because, as frankly we'll know, ordinary just doesn't, I guess, gain any attention. So we want to look at ways that we can make it more remarkable. We also want to make sure that it's helpful and we want to make sure it's usable. Now, they're just 5, I guess, core flavours that if you were to think of them that way, that we look at using in our organisation. And what I challenge you to think of is, what are the 5 universal flavours that you think your customers are looking for, or your particular product users? What's their 5 flavours? And then looking out at delivering them. Does it need to be timely? And if it's timely, do we want to make sure that it's remarkable at the same time? Good food for thought along those lines. Something else that chefs do amazingly well is they understand not only the sense of flavour, but they know that they've actually got to stimulate the senses. And one of the interesting things when it comes to senses is that quite often our taste is what most people think a chef's out there to do. But a good chef actually knows that there are 5 senses to go out there and stimulate. We've obviously got sense of taste. We've got the sense of sound that can happen from the crackle of the crispiness or the chewiness or whatever it might be in the food that we're eating. We've got the sight, the experience of sight. We've obviously got touch and feel and texture, and then we've got the sense of smell. And so great chefs know that it's not just about taste, it's about activating all of these different senses to create an amazing sensory experience. One really interesting fact that you may or may not be familiar with is that when it comes down to this concept of senses, that 90% of taste actually comes from smell. I'll say that again, 90% of taste comes from smell, our olfactory senses. And so this is something that really, people go, really? That's impossible. But it is a real fact. If you can't smell, your sense of taste really, really drops. I remember meeting this interesting man who had a brain injury, and he had lost his sense of smell, so much so that, when an amazing meal was made, he just really couldn't appreciate the taste. So what does that mean? We might think for our own business that a customer is going to buy a product like a mug based on just how it looks. But there are other things that's going to base their decision. It could be the base on how it feels. It might be a basis on the sound it makes when you put it down. If it sounds tinny, they'll think it doesn't feel solid enough, and the sort. So what are the senses that we need to be mindful of when we're creating an experience for our customers, whether they're a diner or someone who's buying a widget? And a good way to think about this in many ways is that a chef thinks more than just one-dimensional. And let me give you a commercial example for this. I run a lot of workshops and conferences for clients around the world. And one of the things that I found is that, you get to so many workshops where they start to look a little bit boring when they're organised by something else. People think we need a screen up there, we need tables and chairs, we need some water, and that's generally sort of the basic kind of stuff that gets done. And yeah, it satisfies the needs for a presenter to deliver and satisfies the need of accommodating the actual people there. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't stimulate the senses or the desires. So what a world-class chef would do to heighten the sensory experience is a number of things. You can imagine that first thing they would work on is something like smell. And so they would have some aromatherapy going. They'd have some sort of essential oils of mandarin burning around the place. Why? Because mandarin heightens the sense of concentration and focus. It's been known to sort of...
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.